This is your city. This is your city wants to know. We want to know the background, the heartbeat of what makes up our beautiful cities. We dig into the backstories from the struggles to the successes of our local entrepreneurs, small business owners, artists, not-for-profit organizations, and the many, many people who make up the intricate tapestry of our communities. Real people, real stories, by you and for you. But wait, that's not it. I love giving my opinion. Just ask anyone who knows me. We can't get enough of the honest, gritty feedback of places that we spend our hard-earned money. I'll give you the good, the bad, and the ugly of the places I eat, sleep, and visit. Disclaimer, my opinion only. All right, so come on, let's get to it.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome back to an amazing episode of This Is Your City. I am Kim, your host, as always, and thank you so much for tuning in once again. Tonight's kind of cool. What I've decided to do, on May 19th, it's World IBD Day. And although this might not air on the 19th, it will air in May. So I thought I needed to lend my voice to raise a little bit of awareness to irritable bowel disease, which is Crohn's disease and ulcerative colitis. So it affects more than 10 million people worldwide. I'm sure there's many, many more than that, but those are documented cases. Myself, I suffer with ulcerative colitis, and so that's why I wanted to raise awareness and lend my voice and get this aired as close to May 19th as I possibly can. And what I'm excited about my guest tonight is because it's kind of a unique situation. Not only does she struggle with Crohn's disease herself, but Stephanie works as a nurse. She's a nurse case manager for a pharmaceutical company. And she works, so being on both sides of the coin is quite interesting because she works as a nurse. She's an advocate for patients who suffer with chronic illness. And so it's just perfect to have Stephanie to the show today because she's a nurse and she also suffers with this chronic illness. So Stephanie Haskett, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for being here. How are you?
Wonderful. Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be on here and to speak with you and spread some advocacy for this topic.
Yes, thank you. And before we start off, I just wanted to quote something that you had said, and I think it's very powerful, and that's why I want to quote it. You said that part of your passion and reason for nursing is to ensure that no one goes left unheard. And to me, that made me feel like, I don't know, it was a really cool thing to hear because I've been a patient. Many of our listeners have been a patient, and I suffer with a chronic illness, chronic pain. And sometimes, as you yourself probably know, we're just left to feel like it's all in our head, like we don't have that voice. And so to hear you say that you have that passion, that no voice goes unheard, I think that's a pretty powerful thing. So thank you for that.
Well, thank you. I mean, it's a part of the whole process. It's known as an invisible disease. And so meaning that, to you and I, we look like normal people, but there is so much more going on there. And so sometimes that voice is muted of these people. And I think the position that I have, that's my passion, is to say, no, this voice matters and this voice needs to be heard. And that's what's really cool about having been on both sides of the coin.
Yes. Thank you for that. Now, just before, I want to take one moment and I'm just going to kind of explain to our viewers what Crohn's disease and ulcerative colitis is, because
for sure,
it's amazing how many people still don't know. They've heard of irritable bowel syndrome, but irritable bowel disease or Crohn's and colitis, a lot of people really have no idea.
For sure.
So I'm just going to take a second to explain that to the listeners. What it is, basically, it's a disease that it inflames the lining of our gastrointestinal tract, and this disrupts our body's ability to digest food, to absorb nutrients and minerals, nutrition and minerals. It disrupts our body to eliminate waste in a healthy manner because, poison, if you don't eliminate it properly, And these are what they're saying are lifelong diseases, and people can experience periods of active symptoms, which in our world we call a flare. And man, I don't even think that word does it justice, Stephanie? Like a flare.
Yeah, exactly.
I guess it could be a flare. It's like sticking a firecracker in your intestines and letting it go off 100,000 times because it's so painful. And then there's other times where the symptoms are like absent, and we call this remission. So when we're absent of symptoms and pain and so forth, it's called remission. And what the interesting thing is that science right now, the exact cause of Crohn's disease and ulcerative colitis is really unknown in the medical industry. And so as a result, there's no cure. So you have no cause, you have no cure. But they are suspecting, they've come a long way since I was first diagnosed years ago. They've come a long way. They're saying genetics, environment, food, microbiome, and microbiome. What is microbiome, right? Like, I'm just going to tell you, I read this thing one time and it kind of explained it really kind of cool. So picture this. Picture you're walking down a very busy street. Let's say New York City, because the city that never sleeps, right? So New York City on a busy weekday where everybody's coming and going to work first thing in the morning. You got scores of people, different people, just all over the place. Now, imagine that at a microscopic level, like just deeper than that. And so right there you have an idea of what a microbiome is. It's inside the body of trillions of little microorganisms, I guess. Thousands of different species that include bacteria, fungi, parasites, viruses, all these little different things. But in a healthy person, it's called like a bug, I guess, healthy bugs. And they coexist peacefully within us. And it's mostly they live in our small and large intestines. But they also are throughout our entire body as well. And for the most part, microbiome is labeled as a supporting organ because it keeps the roll going. It keeps a smooth operation of the healthy body. And in people who suffer with Crohn's or colitis, those bugs are just everywhere and they're not maintained. And so that's something I read one time, like this busy city kind of, and it kind of went, yeah, that's what it feels like in there. So that's just a quick rundown that's a very quick rundown of what Crohn's disease and ulcerative colitis kind of is. It's your small and large intestines just not working, not functioning. And those are the two things that you need for your body to function properly. Because that's where all our food goes, that's where all the nutrients are that spread throughout our body, our waste. That our intestinal tract is one of the most important functions in our body. Would you agree with that, Stephanie?
For sure. And it's one of those things that you don't realize how important a part it plays in your body until it's not functioning properly.
Right. I guess that's like most things, but yeah. And so, Stephanie, let's talk about you for a second. So you suffer with Crohn's disease.
Yes.
So talk to me a little bit about that. Talk to us, like, when were you diagnosed? How did you figure this out?
Yeah, it's funny because as you start to become more aware of medical conditions, you start to think back on your history. And I remember being in my 10 years old, around that age, and having issues with abdominal pains. And my parents ended up taking me to a pediatrician. Pediatrician said, oh, no, I need to just add more fiber to my diet. That was the recommendations. And so that's kind of my earliest memory of remembering that something was wrong with my intestines, that it just wasn't quite working as it was supposed to. And my parents always knew what they called I had like a nervous stomach. So any sort of stress or anything, I'd get that upset stomach and that pain, and it would definitely trigger some symptoms in me. So that played on for a few years until I was 16 years old and I got diagnosed with a form of rheumatoid arthritis first. And so we knew at that point, as you were talking about how your body works, what happens with Crohn's and colitis is it's an autoimmune condition, and our bodies attack themselves because there's something wrong at like a cellular level. And so once you typically have one autoimmune disease, you have another. And so once I got diagnosed with that arthritis, it was within like a 6-month period. I then got the diagnosis of Crohn's. I was lucky enough, I was treated at Sick Kids Hospital in Toronto. And so if I weren't there, I think my diagnosis definitely would have been prolonged just because of the lack of knowledge around it. But yeah, within that 6 months, I had a colonoscopy and that confirmation that it was Crohn's disease. And it's been from there that I've kind of lived with it and grown and learned what it's like to live with Crohn's and also how to advocate for it.
Right. Now, I have ulcerative colitis, you have Crohn's, and by no means am I diminishing anything with ulcerative colitis or any viewers or listeners who have ulcerative colitis, because I have this chronic illness, but it tends to be that Crohn's, people who suffer with Crohn's, it's just that much more elevated. It's higher. There's many more symptoms and there's many more, I don't know. I don't want to be morbid, but the death rate of people with Crohn's is much higher than that of people with UC, ulcerative colitis. And for the most part, people with Crohn's tend to, like I said, ulcerative colitis as well, but persons with Crohn's tend to have more surgeries, more operations, more their intestines removed by sometimes inches, sometimes feet.
Yes.
Colostomy bag, like that's more prevalent with people with Crohn's disease. Why do you think that is?
I mean, part of my theory when thinking about it as a nurse, I think it's partly where it is in the intestine. Like it's usually in that larger part of that intestine, or right where that the small bowel and large bowel connect. And it plays such a huge important role in the absorption, the waste. Like that's where they have similar symptoms in terms of the colitis, ulcerative colitis, and Crohn's. But I think. It's really just depends on each individual disease state, but I think it's partly the location of where it takes place, right. That it allows it to spread and cause more issues.
Yeah. Personally, I have a few family members. I have a cousin that suffers dearly. I don't know how long, like she could be in the hospital sometimes 3 months at a time, septic poisoning, like just so much with Crohn's disease, and it's so painful because, like I said at the beginning, right, like it takes all your nutrients. When you mentioned rheumatoid arthritis, I was like, yeah, because that's another thing that they had diagnosed me with as well in my lower back.
Yep.
Your joints, the fatigue. Talk to us about the extreme fatigue, Stephanie, because that is something that I think that's one of the biggest things people say is in our head.
For sure.
Fatigue.
Yeah, and I think that goes along with so many autoimmune diseases. Like, I always have it. My family talks about when I was a child, like I would put myself to bed. There'd be company over or something, and I would put myself to bed because I was just so exhausted. I was done. And what I like to tell people is that my body is working twice as hard to do the things that you do. And so I just get to a point where I'm done. And so with that chronic fatigue, people just don't understand, well, how can you be tired all the time? Like you're sleeping all the time. And sometimes it's not even just like needing to sleep. It's just our bodies are so overwhelmed with what's going on. Our body is working hard to try and do all the normal things, but then also attack itself and cause issues, and then trying to deal with those issues. And so it's this whole spiraling pattern, and that's why it's so important to get flares under control, because they can cause so many issues. But again, it's more of a subjective matter as an objective matter, like, being able to find that pain or find those issues. Like you can't really have a definitive test. And that's what so much medicine is about, is that scientific, I have this test, this proves XYZ, where the symptom of chronic fatigue, there's no test to identify that. You can check iron levels. You can check like blood work and things like that, vitamin B12 levels to check that. But that's not your clear indication that someone has that fatigue.
Right.
And it's so debilitating in terms of what it does for your day and your lifestyle and what you're able to do, because you might have that motivation and the ambition to do these things, but your body is just telling you no. And that's one of the biggest things I think I've had to learn through the process, is that there's so much importance to that combination of being active, but also that rest. Rest is so important to managing your disease well.
Right. And it's not, let's not confuse that fatigue with tiredness.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
I'm not really tired, but I'm so exhausted.
Yes.
So there's a big difference. So when people, say, well, maybe get some more sleep. It's like,
yes.
I don't need any more sleep.
Exactly.
So, but that is, and there's so many different things. Like you said, once you have an autoimmune, more come with that, because your body is fighting itself. And so that sickness, I don't even know. Sometimes I struggle with the terminology because
I agree.
I don't want to own it. You know what I'm saying? Like this, no, I am not owning you. You are here without my permission, and I don't want you here. So I don't want to own it. So I struggle with terminology sometimes, because
I'd have to 100% agree. It's definitely something that I've struggled with as well, because I never, as much as I live with these conditions, I never want to be that patient with Crohn's, that patient with arthritis. I am more than that. And I think that's one of my biggest things, is that, yes, I can have these things, but that's not my label, right?
Yeah. Okay. So for my listeners out there, I want to talk, Stephanie, because right now I feel like I have somebody on my side, right? Like,
yes,
you can understand, and I bet you can agree, you can understand this. How many times in your life have people said these things to you? Did you watch what you ate?
Mm-hmm.
Are you taking your vitamins? Oh, you must have done this. You must have eaten this. Like, oh my gosh, it's so frustrating, and it's maddening sometimes, because we have this. I don't own it, so I'm not saying it's mine, but it's my body. And so we know. So did you eat this? Did you eat something you weren't supposed to eat? You just want to like walk away or smack them up alongside the head.
Well, it's, they're trying to provide that sympathy, but it's the farthest thing from sympathy when you're in that position. Yeah, they're trying to help you, but there isn't that help. You have done everything you can, because obviously you don't want to live with these symptoms that you're having. And it's not I think so much in this world is we want that magic pill to fix everything, right? We want that magic pill to lose weight. We want that magic pill to be happier. It's the same with the diseases. There's not this one instant thing that's going to cure us. And I think that's so much about what's learning about this disease is, you can think you have everything under control and be in remission, and then all of a sudden that flare pops up and you're like, I am not in control like I thought I was. And that's one of the biggest things to coping with this, is learning that, as much as you think you're in control, sometimes you're not. And, not eating gluten per se is not going to automatically cure this, right? Like, there might be one flare that I have really hard time with vegetables, another flare I have really hard time with fruit, right? Like it really depends. It's so unique to each situation.
Yes. And one thing we've learned when you're diagnosed with this illness, one thing you learn over time is to watch your food. Like at the beginning, you always have food diaries, right?
Yes.
And you're advised to have a food diary to see what affects you and what doesn't affect you. And you're like, yes, okay, I'm gonna manage this, I'm gonna control this. And you have this food diary and you stick to it, right? Like you might only introduce one thing in your meal.
Yeah.
And then, okay, you're fine. So then you introduce another and you're totally fine. But then your next flare, it's what you were totally fine with. You could eat a carrot and be totally fine. And then the next time you can eat a strawberry. Yes. But then again, you have a strawberry another time and you're doubled over in pain. And so it's not that easy. It's not that simple as to say, well, did you watch what you eat? Well, I don't even know what I can eat anymore. I don't even keep a food diary anymore because it's too frustrating for me. Because I've got these scratches and these X's and these like arrows to come up here and this day and dates and times. And it's like, oh my, this was consuming my thoughts.
It's overwhelming when you're trying to focus so much on managing it, but then you don't have that sense of, what, I can eat this, but I can't eat that, like, because it's so unique to what's going on, right?
Yeah. So as a nurse,
Mm-hmm.
when you're in the hospital and you have patients with these autoimmune diseases or what have you, as an advocate, and I love that word lately. I don't know why, but I just love the word advocate. I think because so many of us with COVID and everything going on in the world, we just feel like we need a voice.
Mm-hmm.
It's everybody else controlling us. And when I hear the word advocate now, I just feel like it brings a smile to my face. So
For sure.
you're
And I
an
think it's taken me a bit to take on that title because I had lived with, being a nurse, but then also having these conditions for a while. And it was part of what we talked about, that ownership of, I have this, but I'm not this. And I think as part of my growth in terms of having these diseases, I realized, you know what? I just can't sit back and say, no, I'm totally fine. Nothing's going on. I need to share this because I think that's what's so unique about our world is that the more you share, the more there's that learning and education. And I think by sharing our stories, it can do so much to learn about other people.
and have more empathy.
Exactly.
Right? As a nurse, it's easy. No, let me take those words back. I don't want to say it's easy. As a nurse, because it takes a special person to be a nurse, first off, I could never do it. So thank you. But you have a certain compassion and empathy to begin with that a lot of people don't have.
Mm-hmm.
Just the fact that you went into that profession.
For sure.
To be that trusting, warm person to people who are in agony and pain and distress. But now you have a different level of understanding. So do you find that brings a lot more empathy?
Oh gosh,
It doesn't
yeah.
only have to be with Crohn's or colitis, but with any sort of illness, any patient.
My biggest thing I find so much in healthcare is that, you work with different people and they've gone through so much education. They claim themselves experts in these fields. And the thing is I don't think you can ever be a full expert in everything. People are constantly learning, and that's what's so unique about it. And so when you sometimes take on that title of an expert, you then therefore don't let other people have their voice. And again, that's where that comes into play. And so a lot of what I've done when working with patients is it's sitting and listening to them, because you can learn so much from their stories. The amount I've learned from different peoples and different conditions they've dealt with and how they've managed their life, it's something I'll carry with me for a lifetime, because they've taught me, life skills. And I think that's what makes me so much better for a nurse, is that I can talk to this one patient about this condition, but then I can apply that to another patient and help them deal with their situation a little bit better. And I think it comes into that play out with everything that I do is give them that voice, let them speak, because so much it's that voice is unheard, that you're not able to, you're afraid sometimes, like, oh, they're the expert in my disease, I can't say something. Well, people make mistakes, right? Although they're a specialist, they make mistakes, and sometimes you have the best knowledge. And that's where nursing is a unique role, because we work with so many different specialties that you can sometimes be that educator for everyone.
Right. I love it.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. And you have children?
I have a daughter, yes.
You have a daughter. So, everybody knows who's ever had children. Typically, it's the nurses that do all the work.
Yeah.
The whole time you're in there, it's the nurses. But speaking of being a nurse and a mom,
Mm-hmm.
how did that affect your pregnancy, if at all?
It's a very good question. It was actually one of the times I struggled the most with my Crohn's disease. When I was pregnant with my daughter, we very much planned my pregnancy with my daughter. We knew that best case scenario was to get pregnant when disease was in remission. So my husband and I very much planned that out, knew my disease was in remission. We consulted specialists. And so I felt, I'm ready to deal with this. I have it tackled. But then, that's when life throws you those curveballs. When I was in my second trimester with my daughter, I had quite a severe flare of my Crohn's, and ended up having to go on prednisone, which is a medication to treat, the Crohn's disease, as well as I'm on a medication called Humira, and they actually increased my dose. I was taking it twice weekly to kind of help manage it. And so it was probably about an 8-week period where it was really difficult. Lots of abdominal pain, diarrhea, those types of things, not gaining weight appropriately. And so that was where it was difficult, because I remember having a couple repeat visits in my GI, my gastro doctor who manages my Crohn's office, and him not necessarily taking that time to listen to me. And it was unique because I had a really close relationship with one of the nurses that works with him. And I said, I know that I might look like I'm okay, but my pregnancy is changing my numbers and what he's judging this based on a flare. And so it was that little bit of advocating for myself that, that then he took me a little bit more seriously. And so, I was lucky enough that it then got under control and I did no longer have any issues with my pregnancy in terms of that aspect. I ended up actually, because I was on prednisone, getting diagnosed with gestational diabetes. So I managed that as well in my pregnancy. And then towards the very end of my pregnancy, I also got diagnosed with an inflammatory bleeding disorder that all kind of came about as well. So definitely wasn't an easy pregnancy. I learned a lot. I'm so thankful my daughter is here. She's healthy. She's almost 2 and just thriving. And I'm very lucky. Although it was complicated, it all worked out in the end, and she arrived safely.
Wow. What's the bleeding disorder?
So that's a new one to myself that even I, as a nurse, hadn't dealt with a lot. So the bleeding disorder I got is called ITP. So basically what happens is, again, autoimmune. My body thought there was something wrong with it, and it attacks the platelets, which help our blood to clot. And so what happened was that I didn't have enough platelets. So normal levels are, between 150 and 400. Mine were at 30 when I got diagnosed, when I was pregnant with her. And so there's, of course, pregnancy, bleeding, and things like that. And so it was a big concern in terms of how to manage that. And again, it goes along with that autoimmune. When they were able to control the autoimmune, my levels rose back up. And right before I had my daughter is actually when things kind of came back to normal. And I was able to actually get an epidural, which was in question when I was earlier pregnant with her.
Wow. Yeah, because that the bleeding disorder, that's kind of what I had too.
Okay.
And it was very scary. And my levels were like dangerously low. I won't even say on here what they were telling me. Yeah. The danger of what they were expecting. Yes. If they didn't get it under control, we probably wouldn't be having this conversation today.
Yeah.
It was so bad.
Mm-hmm.
My specialist, he said he was in this business for over 30 years or whatever it was he said, and he had rarely ever seen anybody with my levels. They were so low.
Wow.
Yeah, it was terrible. So to hear you say that, I just started sweating. I'm like, because I've not really met anybody who had that as well.
Yeah, so it's interesting. Yeah, and it is a very scary thing. That's where they monitored my levels so closely when I was pregnant, because again, I was on that borderline. It was quite low, but not as severe as you had mentioned, and you just never know. I could flip that coin and go either direction, right? So
and so prednisone when you were pregnant?
Mm-hmm.
Wow, I have to tell you that prednisone, and anybody listening who needs prednisone, like I'm not anybody to say don't take medication at all. I'm just saying for me personally, it's like the most evil thing on the planet.
Yes.
Evil. Prednisone is so evil. Oh my gosh, I hated it. I became such a different person.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's ugly. But anyway, we needed to do it to get things managed. I get it.
Exactly.
I'm on Remicade right now, so that freaked me out. But thank God we have these things, Thank God we have these things.
They're amazing.
For our life.
I was going to say, and that's where it comes in so much to play for myself, is the biologic medications. They have really improved my quality of life greatly, and I'm forever thankful. But that's not the story for every Crohn's patient. A lot of them trial through a whole different variety of them, and they don't always help manage the disease. But I've been very lucky that not only does it manage my disease, but it's also preventing it from getting worse, which is huge, right? As we talked about, complications of Crohn's and colitis can be quite severe, and so the whole idea is to help prevent them from getting worse.
Right. Now, how did this affect you and your husband? Like, did it have, because lots of different things happen. It's not just being tired or having a stomach ache or diarrhea.
Yeah.
And, for our listeners, I mean, if you're queasy or whatever, you might want to plug your ears for a second. But
Yeah.
Crohn's and colitis, it's our bowels and our intestines. So obviously
Mhm.
that affects, the not so pleasant part of life that's reality.
Mhm.
And it can really affect relationships.
Yeah.
How did your husband manage through this? How did your family help you or not help you? How did that work for you?
Yeah, I mean, my husband, he's been very great in terms of being my support person. We're total opposites. I'm a little more of the worry wart. He's a little more, calm one, and so we level each other out sometimes in those situations. And so especially during my pregnancy, was that constant reminder that everything was going to be okay.
Mhm.
But it's definitely been a learning curve for him. He really hadn't dealt with anyone that had any illnesses or whatever. But it's so cool throughout our relationship to see him become my advocate. And so it's interesting, when we're with friends, listening to him talk about the disease and the information he's picked up from living, with me and dealing with this disease with me, because that's the whole thing with these chronic illnesses, is that you don't deal with them just yourself. Your whole support network does, right? They are learning and growing and understanding what's happening. And there's sometimes that voice when you're not able to be, which is really cool. And so he's definitely learned a lot. He grew up on a farm, so any sort of topic really doesn't bother him. He's pretty easygoing, which I'm thankful for, because there's some times where I'm like, if someone wasn't willing for me to share what I have going on, it would be very difficult.
Yes, yes.
Mhm.
And I think the hardest thing is when we're in a flare and these things are happening to our body, our life kind of stops because we can't go
Yes.
anywhere. If you don't have a bathroom within, 2 jaunts,
Yep.
you can't go anywhere. And the first
Mhm.
thing, you imagine panicking, like everywhere you go, the first thing you're doing is your eyes are darting everywhere for two things: the bathroom and the exit.
Yep.
And if you go out to a restaurant, if you go to visit somebody's home, like that is the first thing is, okay, where's your restrooms?
Yep.
They have to tell you where it is. And because it's a panic, it's always a panic in your mind. Like you can't make it anywhere. I've gone for walks when I was in a flare and had to sit down on the side of the road on the curb
Mhm.
and sit there and wait it out, because if I took one more step, you know what I mean? Like
Yes.
I've had to call my husband, like, I just went for a walk down the block. You
Mhm.
have to come and get me.
Yep.
I couldn't make it home. It's terrifying.
Mhm.
And that's the part that I don't think a lot of people understand. And it's embarrassing.
It's huge. And you can plan all you want, you can be prepared. I have an emergency car kit, I have one of those pee pads, I have a Depends, I have wipes and all, an extra pair of pants,
Yep.
just in case, right? You never know. But even then, when that moment happens, it's still humiliating. And it's the reality for Crohn's patients, right? Like you just sometimes cannot control it.
Yep.
And so yeah, it's being that little bit vulnerable. And I remember I used to have quite a long commute to work. And I remember driving, and everywhere I'd be like, can I pull over there? Would there be privacy there? Can I stop there? And especially now in this world of COVID, where not all public restrooms are accessible, it adds a whole new complication to things. And
Yeah.
so with advocacy for Crohn's and colitis, they've come up with like cards, restroom cards and things like that, that you can present to shop owners. They don't always have the effect they should. Again, there's not that knowledge about what this disease is and how it works.
Yes. I've been denied bathroom
Yeah.
use before.
Mm-hmm.
And I just like sobbed, left that place. And I do fault them.
Mm-hmm.
I try not to judge them, but I do fault them because obviously there's a woman in distress.
Yes.
But I don't fault them in the sense that, like you're saying, there's not enough awareness to this. Like,
Mm-hmm.
The C word, the cancer, everybody's heard of it. They know,
Yes.
and not even comparing the two. So I'm just saying, we just don't have enough awareness. And that's one thing I was going to mention to you. What do you think about the stickers that, the advocacy, can't even speak tonight, like of Crohn's and colitis, are trying to get restaurant owners, gas stations, storefront people to put these stickers on their business, letting people like you and I and some of our viewers know this is a safe place. You can come in here if you need to.
Yeah, I mean, I think they're a great idea, but again, it's an implementation of them, right? You can't just expect to put this sticker up and have it solve all the problems. I think it will definitely be that sense of relief for people to know, okay, this is a safe place for me. Like I'm able to go here. But again, how many people are willing to do that? How do you get that word out? And again, are people going to follow through with that? Like, there's companies that they don't want you to use that restroom. Like they don't want that. And sometimes it's a whole business thing, and I don't know if that will ever change. I'm hoping. I hope as we become more aware of what's happening in this world in terms of not only chronic diseases, but mental health and things like that. There is more acceptive of what's going on, but I think it will take time.
Yes. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think? What do you think we have to do more of to gain awareness?
You know what? That's a really good question. I think things like this, sharing. I think so many people keep these in the dark. It's amazing as soon as you say, oh, I have Crohn's disease. Oh, yeah, my brother, sister, so-and-so. But it's that whole idea that no one wants to be vulnerable and say, yeah, that's me. I have this. And that education. And that's how it starts is, it's the word of mouth. One group tells this person. And with a world that we're so social, I think platforms like this, being able to share people's stories and things like that are a great opportunity to start that education and that advocacy. And I mean, it takes the people as well. Are they willing to learn? Are they willing to grow? Are they willing to take on that education as well? I think will be a huge part of it. Yeah, and I mean, I think the difficult things with this disease is that it looks so different to each person. So although, for example, myself, I'm so lucky I don't have an ostomy bag. I haven't had to have surgery as of yet or anything like that. That's a reality for so many people. And so I can't advocate on that. I can't advocate on, I know how to change an ostomy. I know how to manage them, but I've never had an ostomy myself. And so I can't provide that education on that.
And for those who don't know what that is, do you want to give a quick rundown of what that is?
For sure. So sometimes what ends up happening is that you have to remove a section of the either small or large bowel to be able to help manage this disease. So what happens is that then the intestine is taken to the surface of the stomach, and it is left there as an opening. And so that is how we empty our bowels instead of having to pass it through this damaged intestine and issues like that. Sometimes it's to help the that part heal. Sometimes it's that part is damaged and no longer working. And so surgery occurs, they bring the intestine out and they create what's called like a stoma, and that's where the feces come out of. And so then people attach these bags to them, and that's what collects them, and they have to empty them and those types of things.
And I do think, society has come a long way in that as well. Like
for sure,
a lot of advocates for that, and they've made them, because I mean, that's a taboo thing. And not only is it other people, like when you were saying, people have to want to learn about it and gain awareness, but we need to be willing to talk about it and not have it be so taboo. And
exactly,
it's embarrassing, it's humiliating, but we have to talk about it so that others know what it is. Yeah. And so that it's not a gross, like, oh, I don't want to talk about that, They've made some of these bags like colorful.
Yes.
They've done so many things. Women are going to the beach in their bikinis. Mm-hmm. And I am so proud. Like, I am so proud. I want to cry sometimes. Like, you go, girl, and guy and man. Like, this is not.
Exactly. Yeah.
Men and women.
Exactly. And I think that's what we need too. You talk about those younger generations. It's like, what are they exposed to? What are they being fed in terms of this information? When they see that this person has it, it's going to be more accepted, right? They're not standing out as this is so abnormal. But I know there are some popular fashion companies that are actually promoting models with ostomy bags and stuff too, which is really cool to see because, again, it's that awareness of this is what happens sometimes to people.
You're still a human being. You're still normal. You still live a life. It just so happens that this is part of your reality.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, I'm so appreciative that you came out to talk about this. And I said this to you before, and I want to mention it now because sometimes when you put things out there, it kind of, now if anybody else is listening, they can say, yes, Stephanie, like, I think you should write a book. I truly do, because I don't even know if you can name it like your voice, no voice goes unheard. I don't even know, but you have so much knowledge. You have a wealth of knowledge and experience, and people need to hear it because you've got both sides of it as a nurse, as an advocate, as a person who suffers with this autoimmune and more, because one brings on another. You should write a book. And even if you say, I don't know how to write, I'm not a writer, you know what? You do. You write every single day. You write, hey, how you doing, to somebody on a text, or you write every day, just a thought, write it down, start it as a module, as a chapter. I think you should do it. There's not enough out there. Don't be fearful. You're just probably sweating right now thinking about it, but
well, I appreciate it so much. This is definitely, I'm just starting on this advocacy journey. It started a little while ago with me sharing my story more publicly, and I know this is just the beginning. That's me. The bar's here. I like to go a little bit higher, so I'm really excited to see what this brings in the future in terms of the advocacy, and maybe, who knows, maybe it will be a book. We'll see what happens.
Well, if it is, and I'm hoping that it is.
Yeah.
Please let us know. We'll have you back on. We'll talk about the book. We'll promote the book. We'll do what we have to do.
Sounds great.
Yeah. So thank you so much. I really appreciate this because May 19th is IBD. I guess it's World IBD Day, and which means irritable bowel disease. And please, people, don't tell us that we have irritable bowel syndrome when we tell you we have IBD.
Yep.
It's another pet peeve of mine. Just because you have gas doesn't mean it's Crohn's or colitis, and just because we have gas doesn't mean it's just gas.
Exactly.
But anyway, that's another story. But thank you so much, Stephanie. Thank you for what you do as a nurse, especially in these COVID times, like I told you, it takes a special person to do some of these things. And thank you. Thank you for that. Thank you for being an advocate for not just Crohn's and colitis, but chronic illness patients, giving them a voice, letting them be heard. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. And for you, my listeners, as always, I am so grateful that you tune in every week. I will put some information for Stephanie at the end of this video, and if you know Stephanie, or you hear, or you see her on any of the bulletins or forums on Facebook or anywhere, just give her a shout out, give her some encouragement, because this is a tough thing to be an advocate. But thank you guys for tuning in. And like always, don't forget to share, to like, to tweet, to whatever it is, send a pigeon, I don't know. Tell everybody they should be listening to This Is Your City. Stay safe and stay blessed. Ciao.